Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the greatest survival stories ever told. On the 4th of November, 1914, a British ship named the Endurance sailed through stormy seas. Its destination, the most dangerous continent on Earth, Antarctica. On board were 28 crew members led by the legendary explorer, Sir Ernest Shackleton. His goal was unbelievably ambitious, to be the first human to cross the entire Antarctic continent on foot. Imagine this. No smartphones, no GPS, just pure determination against 50 below zero blizzards. Their plan seemed straightforward enough. Sail through the treacherous Weddell Sea, land at Weddell Bay, and then begin a grueling 2,900-kilometer trek to the South Pole and beyond, finally reaching the Ross Sea on the other side. The journey was estimated to take 120 days. But as you'll soon see, fate had a very different plan. After a brief stop at South Georgia Island, the last outpost of civilization, they pushed into the Weddell Sea on December 5, 1914. They had been warned about unusually thick ice that year, but Shackleton was determined. It wasn't long before the ship was surrounded by pack ice, far denser than anyone had anticipated. By the 18th of January, 1915, the Endurance was stuck fast, frozen solid in a vast, unmoving sheet of ice. The crew tried everything. They tried to ram their way out. They got out on the ice with saws and picks, desperately trying to cut a path for the ship. But it was no use. The ice sheet began to drift, carrying the trapped ship with it. They were now 60 miles from the nearest land, but with open water between them and the shore, walking was impossible. Then, the Antarctic winter descended. Months of 24-hour darkness and brutal, mind-numbing cold. The ship's photographer, Frank Hurley, captured the horrifying ordeal as the immense pressure of the ice began to crush the Endurance's wooden hull. By September 1915, the groaning and creaking of the ship was constant. Cracks started to appear. On October 24th, a massive ice floe slammed into the stern. Water began pouring in. For 3 days, the men pumped frantically in sub-zero temperatures, but it was a losing battle. On the 27th of October 1915, Shackleton gave the order he had dreaded. Abandon ship. A moment later, a loud explosion echoed across the ice as the ship's rear was thrust 20 feet into the air. The Endurance and the dreams it carried began to sink. They were now utterly stranded, castaways on a floating slab of ice in the middle of the Antarctic Ocean. No radio, no way to contact the outside world. To the rest of humanity, they had simply vanished. All they had were 3 small lifeboats, a sledge, their personal belongings, and about 1 month's worth of rations. They slept on the ice, huddling together for warmth. No ships ever ventured this far south. The world assumed they were dead. Shackleton's eyes turned to a map, settling on Paulet Island, 550 kilometers away. Ironically, he himself had stocked that very island with rescue supplies on a previous expedition back in 1903. Each man was forced to limit his personal gear to just 2 pounds. In a heartbreaking decision, Hurley had to smash hundreds of his glass photo plates, but he managed to save 150 of the most important negatives. As food shortages loomed, even the puppies brought on the expedition had to be killed for food. They tried to drag the 1-ton lifeboats across the ice towards land, but the softening summer ice made it a grueling, soul-crushing task. In 3 hours of back-breaking effort, they managed to move just 1 mile. They had no choice but to set up a new camp, which they grimly named Ocean Camp. Shackleton, a master of leadership, kept the men busy with assigned tasks, fighting off the boredom and despair that threatened to consume them. On the 21st of November 1915, the men watched in silence as the Endurance finally sank completely beneath the ice. It was a heartbreaking moment, the final severing of their last link to the world. To make matters worse, the ice floe they were on was drifting east, carrying them further away from land. On December 23rd, they tried marching again, but were soon stopped by thin ice and open water. Their daily rations were pitiful: 1 biscuit, some diluted milk, a bit of cocoa, and a small amount of meat paste. They survived by hunting seals and penguins. Shackleton knew that mental strength was just as important as physical strength. He would sometimes lie about their food stocks, just to keep morale from collapsing. By March of 1916, they finally spotted land, Joinville Island. But it was a bittersweet sight. It meant they had drifted right past their original target, Paulet Island. They were drifting north now, into the dreaded Drake Passage, one of the most dangerous stretches of water on the planet. Ahead of them lay only Clarence Island and Elephant Island. The Drake Passage is infamous for waves that can reach 12 meters high, and it has claimed the lives of 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Their food situation was now dire. They were eating scraps from the dogs they'd been forced to sacrifice and melting ice with their own body heat for drinking water. Here's a crazy side story. The crew had a stowaway named Percy Blackborough. Early on, Shackleton had joked that if they ran out of food, Blackborough would be the first one eaten. Luckily for him, they managed to hunt a 1,000-pound sea leopard just in the nick of time. On April 7, 1916, they spotted Clarence Island 83 kilometers away, but the winds shifted again, pushing them away from land. Their ice sheet was shrinking rapidly, now just 50 meters across. Shackleton ordered the men into the lifeboats, and they began navigating through a maze of open water and icebergs. Disaster struck when a crack suddenly split their ice camp in two, sending one man plunging into the freezing water. Shackleton himself was briefly stranded on a separate piece of ice before being rescued by boat. He ordered the soaked man to walk all night to keep from freezing to death. It sounds brutal, but it worked. The winds toyed with them, constantly shifting their targets. First Clarence, then King George Island, then Hope Bay, until finally, they set their sights on Elephant Island, 160 kilometers to the northwest. Their thirst was so intense their lips swelled up. They resorted to eating raw seal meat just to get enough blood and moisture to swallow. Finally, after being afloat for an unbelievable 497 days, they made a final push in the boats and landed on Elephant Island on the 15th of April, 1916. The feeling of solid ground beneath their feet was like heaven. But their ordeal had taken a toll. Blackborough's legs had given out completely, and another crewman, Rickenson, suffered a heart attack. Elephant Island was a barren, uninhabited rock. No ships ever passed this way. Their options were grim. Sail 800 kilometers to Cape Horn. Shackleton chose South Georgia. It was further, but the winds were more favorable. On the 24th of April, he and 5 of his best men set off in one of the tiny 22-foot lifeboats. What followed was one of the most daring open-boat journeys in history. They rowed in 4-hour shifts, constantly soaked, seasick, and utterly exhausted. In the Antarctic winter, night lasted for more than 20 hours. They navigated using a sextant during the few brief moments the sun appeared. A monstrous wave nearly sank them. Frustration peaked when Shackleton found himself yelling at a bird that flew too close. After weeks at sea, just 3 miles from South Georgia, a hurricane-force storm hit. They gave up all hope, but somehow, they survived. They finally landed on May 10, 1916, after 522 days since they had last seen civilization. But their luck was mixed. They had landed on the wrong side of the island. Their boat was too damaged to sail around, so their only option was to cross the island on foot, a 29-mile journey over unclimbed, 10,000-foot mountains and glaciers. No one had ever done it before. They rested for 9 days, surviving on albatross and seals. Then, on May 19th, Shackleton, his second-in-command Frank Hurley, and Tom Crean set off at 3 a.m. with only the lightest gear. They trudged through knee-deep snow, repeatedly climbing peaks only to find their path blocked. Finally, tied together by a rope, they cut steps down a steep, icy slope. After 36 non-stop hours, they stumbled into the Stromness whaling station on May 20th. They were unrecognizable, with long, matted beards and torn, ragged clothes. The station manager fed them, clothed them, and helped them rescue the other 3 men from the far side of the island. But the mission wasn't over. They still had to save the 22 men left behind on Elephant Island. 3 rescue attempts failed, blocked by the impenetrable winter ice. Finally, on his 4th try, aboard a small Chilean ship called the Yelcho, Shackleton broke through. On August 30th, 1916, they reached Elephant Island. The 22 men, led by Frank Wild, had survived for 128 days, sheltering under 2 upturned boats. Wild's leadership was incredible. His daily ritual was to tell the men, "Pack your bags, boys, the boss may come today." During that time, the ship's surgeon had to amputate Blackborough's gangrened toes. Just as they were preparing to leave their camp for good, the Yelcho appeared on the horizon. Every single man was alive. After nearly 2 years lost to the world, all 28 members of the Endurance expedition returned home. It's a miracle of leadership, teamwork, and the sheer power of the human will to survive. In 2022, the wreck of the Endurance was discovered, sitting perfectly preserved 10,000 feet deep on the Antarctic seabed. And on South Georgia Island, you can visit Shackleton's grave, a final monument to one of history's most epic tales of survival. Thank you so much for watching.